The wind whistles furiously among the highest peaks where the snow is a perpetual blanket and the white mountains tear the veil of the clouds. Here, a relentless freezing and biting cold penetrates to the very marrow of the bones. Millennial rocks defy the passage of time, and storms of unusual violence erase everything in their path. The dawns dye the snow a crimson, almost bloody color. The sunsets are so frigid they freeze even one's breath, and at night the roar of avalanches booms like ancestral ghosts in the deep darkness. On the horizon, a sleeping giant emerges imposingly before the eyes, blurring the boundaries between palpable reality and the most feverish imagination. The summit, that distant dream pinned in the heights, welcomes us to the place where the earth violently collides with the sky. This is Everest, the highest mountain on our planet. In this realm, heights cease to be just a number and become a constant threat to survival. Winter, more than a transitional season, is a perpetual state, and with it the cold stands as the true and absolute ruler of life on this sleeping colossus. However, in what is supposed to be an inert place, where abysmal altitudes and freezing temperatures have taken charge of eradicating all possibility of existence, nature, as if challenging the gods, not only resists, but flourishes with astonishing tenacity. In the midst of the most hostile conditions, imaginable wild species show their purest and most untamed facet, looking a frozen death straight in the eyes and living to tell the tale. Amidst the cruelest snowstorms, the imposing yak experiences firsthand all the inclemency of the perpetual Himalayan winter. Pika's tiny and resilient survivors take refuge underground from the hostilities of the climate, surviving with relative luxury the onslaught of sub-zero temperatures, while the red panda curls up with its dense and bushy tail to evade hypothermia during the coldest nights. Each wild species precisely executes its survival strategy to avoid perishing in this white world where the heights incessantly threaten life. The black bear, a gigantic beast, rummages patiently among the convalescent vegetation in search of food. A few insects or some fresh berries constitute a veritable feast in this world of extreme austerity. The burrell, a high-altitude herbivore, grazes on near-vertical slopes thousands of feet up, where only it enjoys the freshest pastures. Meanwhile, the musk deer tirelessly nibbles down to the last moss in its path in a superhuman effort to avoid succumbing to hunger. but perishing before such a demanding climate and an unprecedented food shortage are not the only challenges faced by the wild inhabitants of this imposing mountain. When predators lurk, the freezing living conditions become a minor threat compared to the imminent danger of falling prey to the claws and jaws of the dictators of the food chain. Hidden among slopes frozen in time, the ghost of the mountain, a feline of glacial beauty and a calculating mind, fixes its piercing eyes on its next victim. When the snow leopard stalks, there is nothing its prey can do. A leap, an accurate and fulminating swipe, and it's all over. On these same steep terrains, where even the slightest form of life represents a true miracle, wolf packs dominate the food chain with relentless fervor. A deep howl echoes through the mountains, and the entire pack is ready to unleash its reign of terror. Thousands of feet high, the bearded vulture, an ace of the Himalayan skies, watches carefully on the horizon in search of fresh carrion. In just seconds, this cunning vulture lifts the remains of the victims of the agitated wildlife of this ecosystem to the heights, dropping them from abysmal distances. This is wildlife on Everest, hostile, fragile, delicate, but at the same time immensely fascinating. Located in the middle of the rugged Himalayan mountain range on the border between China and Nepal, with an altitude of 29,029 feet, Mount Everest stands as the highest mountain on the planet. Immersed in a geological massif where peaks like Lhotse and Nuptse also emerge, each over 26,247 feet high, Everest is much more than just a mountain. It represents an entire ecosystem where fauna and vegetation have adapted to the most inclement living conditions. At lower altitudes up to approximately 13,123 feet, dense coniferous forests full of pines and firs take over the landscape. In these, vegetation is much more abundant, and even during the warmer months, shrubs, grasses, and even wildflowers fill these mountain strata with vivid colors. Ascending a few thousand feet, the trees die out, and sparse grasses, mosses, and lichens appear tenaciously clinging to the rocks. Beyond 19,685 feet, vegetation becomes almost non-existent, and except for a few lichens, no form of plant life manages to thrive. Like the vegetation, the temperatures are a faithful reflection of Everest's altitude. While in the lowlands, the thermometer can even show pleasant temperatures hovering around 77 degrees Fahrenheit, in summer above 19,685 feet high, extreme cold is the norm, with an eternal winter where temperatures constantly remain below freezing. The summit, undoubtedly one of the most hostile places on the planet, is punished by a bone-chilling cold where temperatures of up to minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit are the day-to-day. Here, hurricane-force winds of more than 186 miles per hour turn this corner of the world into a true hell on Earth. While the summit of Everest, more than 5 miles high, is an inert place where no macroscopic life form could progress, at about 13,123 feet from the highest point in the world, the story is completely different. In these mountain strata, against all odds, wildlife flourishes in its maximum splendor, with blue sheep running among the rocks, deer devouring the scarce shoots, and marmots emerging from their burrows. However, in less than a second, this whole scene of apparent pacifism and extreme survival is corrupted by a raw and grotesque act of savagery. With a cold stare and a freezing wind whipping its dense fur at the voice of a thunderous howl, the alpha gathers the pack for an impregnable hunt. Immediately following the leader's order, the pack congregates. Although weighing up to 99 pounds and with a powerful jaw capable of crushing bones, surviving a lone wolf is quite a feat for a prey. When a whole formidable pack of these predators goes on the prowl, it is almost impossible to escape. Not even the sub-zero temperatures of Everest are capable of limiting the hostility and savagery displayed by these predators when their stomachs rumble with hunger. With a robust appearance, Himalayan wolves are perfectly adapted to live in an ecosystem battered by freezing temperatures. Their fur, dense and woolly with a thick undercoat, provides them with enviable thermal insulation, with which they manage to stay warm even on those days when the cold intensifies. Their face, relatively large compared to their body, has an elongated snout and erect, well-furred triangular ears that guarantee survival against hypothermia. Strong and muscular legs with well-padded paw pads are ideal for walking on snowy and rocky terrain, exactly the kind that abounds in their vast home on Mount Everest. Whether through the alpine forests in the lowlands or over the steep terrain of the mountain slopes, the packs rule the food chain at will, inflicting terror on species such as blue sheep, Himalayan taurs, deer, pikas, and even the glorious yaks. The slightest trace of a footprint or the stealthy scent of a trail is more than enough for the alpha to give the command, engaging the pack in a new hunt. Thanks to their highly advanced sense of smell, these cunning canids can perceive even the faintest scent of an ungulate several miles away. Prodigious eyesight and an enviable sense of hearing are also part of their innate abilities to find their disadvantaged prey. With up to 8 members forming part of the group, only a large prey will be able to satisfy the appetite of these fierce hunters. In a habitat as hostile as Everest, wolves always prefer to limit their efforts to copious hunts, rather than capturing small prey that will not provide considerable amounts of meat. Once the location of their prey is elucidated, the pack marches steadily towards its future victim, following what appear to be the tracks of a deer. Through howls, head movements, and body postures, the alpha elaborates a very complex hunting strategy that minimizes its prey's chances of survival. With their victim already on the horizon, the wolves rely on their unparalleled stealth to approach the cervid with the utmost caution. Their fur in shades of white, brown, and grey camouflages the canids with unsettling efficiency, making them disappear among the limited vegetation and pale surroundings. Since failing a hunt could compromise the pack's survival, the alpha plans every last move, ensuring to end up with his cruel bite in the juicy meat of the deer. With every wolf involved in the hunt, the alpha gives the starting signal and, breaking his stealth, lunges at the ungulate. Although the deer undertakes a rapid flight across the slopes, the strategy of these carnivores is not based on a surprise attack, but rather on a prolonged endurance race in which each member of the pack actively participates, limiting the prey's escape possibilities. Having succumbing to hunger as their only alternative, the canines vigorously stalk the ungulate, not faltering in their decision to give it a painful death. After an exhausting race, the cervid's legs begin to fail, and every step becomes a challenge. Between the demands of the terrain and having a whole hungry pack of carnivores behind it, the inevitable happens. And panic-stricken, the ungulate yields being cornered by the pack, which soon gives the mammal an honorable and at the same time painful death using their powerful bite. After the pack has hunted down a voluptuous prey, the predators prepare to devour it. Of course, although anarchy seems to reign in these feasts, the truth is that these canines are governed day to day by a strict hierarchical order in which the alphas, among other privileges, feed first. After having devoured almost the entire prey, leaving nothing but a few bones now with full stomachs, the pack looks for a cozy place to rest. Since snowstorms with strong blizzards and freezing temperatures are an everyday occurrence in their habitat, when they are not chasing an unfortunate prey across enormous distances, the dogs take the opportunity to rest, and above all to shelter from the freezing weather. Caves, rocky overhangs, and even rudimentary burrows are ideal places to spend a more than deserved rest. During this time of relative relaxation, away from the tension of the hunt's wolves, usually reinforce their social relationships through interactions such as games. Simulating fights and tugging at objects, the dogs create an atmosphere of harmony in the group that guarantees the unity of the pack. When a wolf attempts to break the marked social hierarchy by climbing the ranks, the alphas are quick to remind the rebellious dog of its place, subduing it through loud howls and elaborate body postures. Even though each canid is a formidable beast, the secret to the survival of these predators lies in their pack life. Living in large and well-coordinated packs is what makes it possible for them to capture copious prey that far exceed them in size. One of these prey is precisely a gigantic bovid, weighing up to a ton, magnificently adapted to life at more than 19,685 feet high. For the massive yak, altitudes are nothing more than just a number, as this robust mammal sees its isolated habitat as the perfect place to thrive. With an exorbitantly long and dense coat, the yak possesses perhaps the best natural coat of the entire mountain to survive sub-zero temperatures. A small hump on the shoulders, as well as very long and curved horns up to 3.3 feet in length, present in both females and males, make these ungulates an unmistakable species. Those same rocky slopes and snowy areas that could be considered barren places for life by other wild species are seen as a welcoming habitat by this skilled survivor. Thanks to its very dense fur and having a thick layer of body fat, the yak is capable of resisting all the hostility of the Everest winter in its own flesh. No matter that the thermometer drops to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and hurricane-force winds violently batter its corner of the mountain, this bovid doesn't even flinch at the adverse living conditions. Just as it is adapted to the extreme climate, while for other wild species finding food on these steep terrains is quite a challenge, the yak finds a true feast on these rugged soils. Being an herbivore specialized in the consumption of high mountain vegetation, alpine herbs, mosses, dwarf shrubs and sedges are part of its very unnutritious diet. The low quality of its food, added to its enormous size, means that the yak must spend up to 12 hours a day grazing. Walking slowly across the vast alpine meadows, this ungulate carefully scrounges the ground, attentive to the slightest sign of anything that even looks edible. To find its limited food sources, this horned colossus employs its very sensitive sense of smell, with which it can perceive even the smallest blade of grass, even several hundred feet away. Even when its sustenance is located under a thick layer of snow, the yak has no qualms about using its strong hooves and large head to unearth what are exquisite snacks to it. While the fibrous diet based on herbs and shoots of this giant has a somewhat questionable nutritional value thanks to a highly advanced digestive system, it is able to make the most of every bite. Like a good ruminant after its long grazing walks, the herbivore spends hours chewing again the partially digested food, something that guarantees that not even the smallest nutrient is wasted. Although they manage to absorb small amounts of water from their very dry diet, these ungulados usually actively look for wetlands, small rivers or puddles to drink from. While when the freezing temperatures take over its habitat, it takes shelter from the cold among rock formations. If surprisingly the thermometer rises in a display of its adaptation, the yak can even wallow in available water sources to keep cool. Since its demand for food is not exactly tiny, after spending time grazing in an area, resources generally begin to quickly become scarce, at which point the herbivore must seek new horizons. Setting aside their intimidating appearance that might lead one to intuit territorial behavior, both males and females are highly social, having no objection to interacting with their conspecifics. Females, along with their calves, even form large herds with up to hundreds of individuals, which becomes quite a spectacle, seeing so many giants taking over the heights. For their part, males are somewhat more flexible in their gregarious behavior, being able to live in complete solitude, as well as living in small bachelor groups. These groups, often formed outside the mating season, are of vital importance for when the rut precisely begins, a time when the large stallions will compete for access to the females. In these herds, testosterone can almost be smelled miles away, with these robust bovines competing for who stands as the dominant of the group, in what is a kind of training for the mating season. In establishing the hierarchy, size and physical strength are everything. Often the largest and most muscular yak is the one who holds dominance over the group. Of course, this authority is tested quite often. The older and more experienced males also tend to hold a privileged position in the group, a product of both their bulk and their reputation in combat. Naturally, with young males thirsty for power, there is never a shortage of challengers intending to appropriate the dominant position. Here, intense ritualized combats take place in duels that, while rarely ending in the death of one of the yaks, involve strong headbutts charges with the horns and displays of strength. The duel often ends when one of the males, overcome by exhaustion, decides to yield to his opponent, accepting his defeat with submissive behavior. Although many ungulates opt for a life in complete solitude, living in these groups brings convenient advantages in terms of protection against predators. heat maintenance, and of course preparation for the rut. While the huge yak resists the hostilities of life in the heights of Everest, the tiny Himalayan pika proves that it is not necessary to weigh a ton to make a place for oneself in this wild ecosystem. Weighing around 5.3 ounces and measuring no more than 7.9 inches, these tiny mammals are another of the incredible life forms that adapt to the challenging altitudes of Everest. Inhabiting rocky areas near coniferous forests, the compact pikas not only survive, but are one of those fascinating wild species that even manage to thrive despite the hostile climatic conditions. Like the giant yak, this lagomorph also boasts a very warm coat that allows it to stay well wrapped up even during the days when Everest shows its most hostile side. Unlike their relatives, rabbits' pikas have small rounded ears that limit heat loss. Their paws, despite being surprisingly strong and with an enviable traction ideal for rocky terrains, are quite small, fitting perfectly with their reduced body dimensions. To complement its adaptations to extreme cold, this skilled survivor usually inhabits comfortable burrows in crevices in the rocks or cozy tunnels where it manages to shelter from sub-zero temperatures. It often prefers to live in complete solitude or perhaps with some conspecifics nearby, but almost always they choose to lead a solitary and elusive life. While during the freezing nights it curls up inside its rudimentary refuge, daytime is the time to get to work, emerging from the burrow to search for food. Since it does not hibernate, the small pika cannot simply sink into a deep sleep when its habitat turns white, requiring food year-round. This is why, when the relatively warm summer days arrive, when the thermometer can even reach 68 degrees Fahrenheit, at these low altitudes, the astute pika takes the opportunity to store food for the winter. While during this warmer season, Everest does not show itself as a generous habitat, much less one that wastes food, rummaging tirelessly in the ground. It manages to find alpine herbs, sedges, mosses, lichens, and with a bit of luck, even wildflowers. Every little piece of food counts when the mammal has experienced firsthand the calamities of winter austerity. A humble bundle of herbs, or perhaps some fresh moss, anything goes to satiate its appetite. Thanks to its extensive knowledge of the territory, this tiny furball is able to optimize its foraging time, and using its powerful incisors, it can cut even the finest grass without any effort. Added to its strategy of storing food in piles of grass called hay piles, the pika, of course, cannot help but devour vast amounts of those plant snacks it encounters. Having a high intake allows it to store a significant reserve of fat, something that could save its life when food is glaringly absent. In addition to taking advantage of the warmer days to forage for food, with a bright sun reigning in the heights, the mammal does not miss the opportunity to take relaxing sun baths, with which it manages to warm up a few degrees, something not at all negligible when living in the frigid Everest ecosystem. Of course, the pika cannot afford the luxury of completely relaxing, as it never knows when a voracious predator is on the prowl wanting to make it its prey. Although it's no more than 7 ounces of meat do not represent a substantial contribution of food in this hostile ecosystem, no prey is despised. Golden eagles, owls, red foxes, and even wolves see the small pika as a juicy prey, requiring very little effort, so they will not hesitate to devour it if they have the chance. To escape the clutches of death represented by a fierce bird of prey or a hungry canine, the pika remains ever attentive to its perimeter, watching out for even the slightest movement that might look suspicious. Its first line of defense to avoid ending up in the jaws of a carnivore is its advanced camouflage. The reddish-brown-grey tones of its fur help it hide perfectly in rocky environments, managing to go unnoticed when hungry predators are nearby. Naturally, upon being directly threatened by a falcon, or perhaps a fox using its muscular legs, the pika will not think twice and will begin a rapid flight bound for the safety of its burrow. Boasting surprising agility in these rugged terrains, it is able to leave its pursuers behind in just a few seconds. Often at the same time, a pika discovers a voracious predator lurking nearby. It immediately emits a characteristic whistle aimed at warning neighboring pikas of the threat. Although they are not at all social, their alarm calls constitute a very effective method of collective defense. Alerting its conspecifics to an imminent attack limits deaths in the colony, something that increases the chances of survival for all the mammals. Likewise, upon hearing this particular squeak, the predator knows it has lost the element of surprise, which is why it often decides to abandon its attack. The squeaks can occasionally also be used to mark territory, urging a conspecific to turn around and give up its intentions to incur into someone else's territory. This territorial behavior is nothing more than a survival measure that ensures maintaining exclusivity of foraging areas as well as avoiding unexpected visits to its burrow. With an increasing food reserve inside its refuge, losing this invaluable pantry after a theft could prove deadly by the time low temperatures take over its small corner of the mountain. Just as the tiny pika withstands the onslaught of the weather in the rocky areas of the mountain, a few thousand feet closer to the base on the slopes covered with temperate coniferous forests, a quiet and charismatic mammal moves among the thick vegetation, devouring an exquisite bamboo stalk. The red panda appears on the scene as one of those amazing creatures that manages defying the odds to survive in such an inclement habitat. With a thick coat of bright reddish-brown, the red panda has little to do with the Asian black and white bear. Its rounded head with white patches around the eyes, which contrast with its reddish coloration, gives it a captivating appearance. A long bushy tail with alternating rings in reddish and dark brown tones is one of its most striking features. In addition to its lush fur, this mammal often uses its tail as a scarf, wrapping itself up with it when temperatures press. The densely forested slopes are ideal for the arboreal lifestyle of the exotic red panda. Thanks to its short, strong legs crowned with sharp, semi-retractable claws, This mammal is a prodigious tree climber capable of navigating the branches with enviable dexterity. To maintain balance during its acrobatics on the trees, its long tail serves an excellent function as a counterweight. Its arboreal behavior allows it to stay off the radar of most predators that govern life within this habitat. Given that a small pacifist mammal of no more than 13.2 pounds does not exactly instill much fear, the red panda must rely on its stealth to elude the multiple carnivores that see it as mere prey. Cunning predators such as the snow leopard, the clouded leopard, or even fierce birds of prey may undertake the task of subduing this peaceful mammal with their impregnable hunting skills. To evade these perpetrators of savage killings, the panda chooses to leave its entire survival in the hands of its advanced stealth. While its reddish fur might seem to paint a target on its back for predators, the truth is that it camouflages with the moss and lichen-covered trunks that abound in its habitat, thereby achieving the perfect disguise against the most hostile predators. Staying perfectly still and curled up on its own body, the red panda manages to go completely unnoticed, staying off the radar of carnivores that would literally kill for a piece of its flesh. Although its first instinct when faced with stalking, bloodthirsty predators will always be to stay hidden when cornered, this mammal is capable of putting all its pacifist temperament aside and becoming aggressive in a desperate attempt to save its life. When a snow leopard or perhaps a golden eagle directly threatens the panda, it gathers its courage, adopting a threatening posture, standing on its hind legs to appear larger and more intimidating. While this may seem like an absolutely desperate measure, it can sometimes yield surprising results, managing to deter predators from attacking. Having avoided becoming part of the diet of heartless carnivores, the red panda now prepares to satiate its own appetite. Despite being classified as a carnivore and actually having a digestive system perfectly adapted to the consumption of meat, surprisingly, this mammal chooses to follow a primarily herbivorous diet. Although it is not at all related to the giant panda, this mammal has a deep-rooted taste for tender bamboo shoots, making up the bulk of its diet. While digesting these branches and leaves can be somewhat laborious, the lack of competition for this food guarantees it an almost infinite source of sustenance, no matter how battered by austerity its habitat may be. Of course, when its home on the slopes of Everest proves abnormally generous with fruits, berries, and acorns sprouting everywhere, this adaptable survivor doesn't hesitate to devour such appetizing snacks. When foods as varied as roots, eggs, insects, and even small vertebrates are available, the red panda shows its omnivorous nature, immediately incorporating them into its diet. Its ability to adapt its diet to the fluctuating food sources of its habitat is one of the keys to its survival. While other species with somewhat picky appetites find themselves starving when they cannot find their limited food options, the red panda never says no, not even to the most modest food sources. Even though when it manages to find nutritious food like fruits or insects, it manages to satiate its appetite more easily when consuming its main food, tender bamboo, shoots the red panda forages for up to 13 hours a day. During this marathon search for food, the self-proclaimed herbivore consumes up to 8.8 pounds of bamboo, only in this way managing to satisfy its nutritional demands. Its slow and methodical movements when looking for food are compensated by a highly sensitive sense of smell that acts as a kind of natural radar to find those exquisite shoots. Carefully rummaging in the undergrowth and moving from one branch to another, the mammal inevitably reaps the fruits of its patience, devouring what are succulent snacks to it. Thanks to having a false thumb, the panda is able to manipulate the branches it gets at, while focusing its bite on the most nutritious parts of the shoots. When it is not immersed in a ceaseless search for food, it is likely to be curled up on a comfortable branch, wrapped in its tail to conserve its body heat. This amazing creature sleeps around 10 hours a day, giving due value to deep rest. Another of the tasks that usually occupies its not very hectic routine is grooming and licking its striking fur. This, in addition to serving as leisure, protects its coat from parasites and removes vegetation debris. Like the tiny pika, this mammal absolutely does not tolerate a conspecific invading its lands. So to avoid annoying incursions, it devotes a significant part of its day to marking its territory, leaving its scent through its anal glands, urine, feces, and even scratching its body against tree bark. At the same time that in the lush forests of the slopes, the red panda fills this vast ecosystem with color, in the rocky areas where the steep terrains rise as far as the eye can see, a pale and lethal predator hides amidst the rugged relief. In a habitat where a deep silence takes over the ecosystem, the stealthy snow leopard appears as a ghost, being a creature so majestic and at the same time an unscrupulous killer, capable of annihilating anything that crosses its path. With a dense, soft coat in shades from pale smoke grey to a yellowish cream with dark rosettes, this feline, besides being able to resist low temperatures without even flinching, manages to disappear in plain sight amidst its rocky and snowy surroundings. Its head with a relatively small snout and ears minimizes heat loss. In this, its large, pale, green-tinted eyes stand out with a piercing gaze that reveals death itself. While other wild species could never even take a couple of steps on this rugged terrain, the ghost of the mountain is capable of moving with an unsettling dexterity, using its robust paws with large pads. Like the colorful red panda, this felid employs a long tail, up to 3.3 feet in length, as a counterweight when walking over unstable terrain, just as it sometimes also functions as a warm scarf. Given the scarcity of prey that usually plagues its isolated habitat, This imposing hunter typically dominates vast territories of up to dozens of square miles, where it imposes its will as an apex predator. After several days of starvation upon finding a prey, the leopard knows full well that failing a hunt could literally cost it its life, so having a Himalayan blue sheep, its favorite prey, before its eyes, it plans every last move of its attack to ensure success. Despite feeling its stomach growling loudly, the feline does not despair, knowing well that its best weapon is infinite patience. Observing from a nearby rocky cliff, the predator watches even the slightest movement of what it hopes will become its victim. Using its camouflaged fur, the feline remains hidden until it is close enough to the prey. After having stalked the ungulate from the shadows for several minutes and up to hours, the ruthless hunter sees its opportunity and, with a leap of up to 49.2 feet long, falls upon the defenseless prey who until just a few seconds ago was placidly foraging among the rocks. Faced with such an impregnable attack, the prey's chances of survival are, to put it mildly, slim. Generally, the feline does not drag out its hunts, and after just a few seconds puts an end to the killing with a powerful bite straight to the back of the neck or throat, asphyxiating it or fracturing its neck. Since it often manages to satiate its appetite with around 11 pounds of meat, upon finding copious prey, the felid usually stores the leftovers in a safe place, such as an overhang among the rocks or a crevice. In these makeshift pantries, the felid manages to protect its kill from potential scavengers who might want to seize a substantial prey with minimal effort. After having eaten to its fill of the juicy meat of a blue sheep, the feline can go up to 4 days before feeding again. But being an all-powerful apex predator, the snow leopard does not limit its ferocity to these sheep. A wide variety of ungulates, such as ibexes, Himalayan taurs, and musk deer, can also fall into the crosshairs of this skilled hunter. Likewise, smaller prey like marmots, pikas, hares, and even some rodents can supplement a strictly carnivorous diet. Although its habit of storing carrion allows it to make the most of its hunts, sometimes it can also bring about some rather unpleasant encounters. The fresh smell of meat can travel up to several miles in the frigid air, reaching the highly sensitive sense of smell of Himalayan wolves. As soon as they perceive what is to them an exquisite aroma, the dogs will undertake a direct march to the feline's domains. While against a single canid, the snow leopard might manage to prevail, thanks to a more robust body and sharp claws capable of delivering bloodthirsty swipes against a whole pack, the felid can do nothing but try to flee to preserve its life. The wolves, relying on their insurmountable numerical superiority, can quickly corner the leopard. The insurmountable agility of the felid allows it to escape unharmed through the steep terrain, watching from afar as the wolves keep the fruits of its hunt. Another of those unfortunate visits the snow leopard might receive is precisely the incursion of one of its conspecifics. With a highly territorial temperament, the feline does not tolerate the slightest encounter with one of its kind, so it usually demarcates and patrols the borders of its domains with the aim of avoiding invaders. By marking with urine and feces as well as scratching trees and rocks, the felid leaves clear warning signs at the limits of its lands as a clear deterrent to outsiders. Of course, although extremely intimidating, these danger signs are not always heeded by invaders who, determined to expand their territory, are willing to fight in a bloodthirsty duel where their powerful bites and sharp claws will be used as weapons to inflict the most pain. And speaking precisely of the voracious hunters of these ungulates among the thick vegetation of the alpine forests, the fuzzy shadow of a tiny but very astute carnivore can be seen. Although with its no more than 30.9 pounds and around 35.4 inches in length, the red fox does not represent the slightest threat to adult musk deer. The small fawns do not have the same luck, being one of the favorite prey of these elusive hunters. Sneaking carefully through the forest, the canine approaches with unparalleled stealth toward the innocent offspring, who does not suspect that it is in its last moments of life. With a leap just as the wild canine appears, it disappears, but now with the small musk deer between its teeth. Even though its dense and thick orange-red coat seems to give away its position, the truth is that it provides an advanced camouflage perfect for hiding before its fierce attacks against small mammals, rodents, birds, and of course ungulate offspring. Although with its advanced hunting skills, the red fox seems like the perfect prototype of an uncompromising carnivore. In fact, this cunning predator is not limited to a meat-based diet, adopting omnivorous habits, being able to devour juicy insects, fruits, berries, roots, shoots, and of course having no objection to taking advantage of a copious carcass, becoming a scavenger. Like a good opportunistic predator, this canid feeds on practically whatever it comes across. Thanks to very acute senses of sight and smell, it can easily find the location of hares, mice, insects, fresh fruits, or tender roots. Since the bulk of its diet is made up of small rodents, the red fox is a true specialist in hunting them. Stalking with great caution among the dense vegetation, the canid uses the terrain cover to guarantee the element of surprise in its attack. With an unsuspecting rodent in its sights, the fox leaps into the air and drops with its front paws on its prey in a technique known as a mouse pounce, in which it catches its defenseless prey with its paws or its fine-tuned bite, whether it is in the grass or under a thick layer of snow. For those rodents that make the mistake of emitting the quietest squeak when the red fox is on the prowl, not even their underground burrow represents an impregnable refuge against the hunting skills of this dog. In just a few seconds, this cunning predator can dig up to several feet underground, raiding the burrows of mice voles and marmots, giving them a painful death and getting a good meal in the process. Not even extremely agile prey like hares can escape the lethal bite of this predator, because being able to run at high speeds in short bursts, the fox will not let such an appetizing prey escape. But not everything in the life of the red fox is hunting and inflicting fear on dozens of wild species. With a full stomach, this intelligent canine can take things somewhat calmly, spending a large part of its day resting in comfortable dens or even among thick thickets. Like the snow leopard, this mammal also uses its bushy tail as a scarf curling up in it during its placid rests and gaining a few extra degrees of body heat. Speaking of the fierce ghost of the mountain, leaving aside all the acts of savagery that the red fox perpetrates on small mammals and tiny rodents being a mesopredator, it sometimes has to witness the food chain turn against it. And this is precisely when bloodthirsty predators such as snow leopards, black bears, Himalayan wolves, and even birds of prey come into the picture. Of course, for these carnivores to get their claws and fearsome bites on the dog, they must first find it. Its highly stealthy behavior is one of its survival measures to avoid falling out of favor in the crosshairs of one of the rulers of the Everest food chain. Moving with extreme caution among the vegetation, the fox goes completely unnoticed, not giving even the slightest sign of its presence. If in a turn of events it is detected by a larger predator, this wild dog does not usually want to show its bravery, engaging in a fight that will inevitably end with its corpse. Instead, when directly threatened, relying on its enviable agility, it will undertake a rapid flight through the forest, running up to 31.1 miles per hour away from the claws of its pursuers. Its destination after these fleeting retreats is often a comfortable burrow where it takes refuge both from the weather hostilities of the outdoors and from the ravages caused by predators seeing it as prey. With the ingenious red fox sheltered in its cozy burrow in the lower strata of the mountain, ascending to 22,966 feet in altitude, a majestic bird of prey is more than accustomed to seeing everything from above. With a wingspan of over 9.8 feet and weighing up to 17.6 pounds, the bearded vulture becomes a true giant on the side of the mountain. Inhabiting desolate, steep cliffs at the most extreme heights, this bird of prey is probably one of the wild species that lives at the highest altitudes on the entire planet. Its striking plumage in shades of dark grey and bluish-black on its back and wings, and an underside dyed in gradients from cream to intense orange, makes this bird stand out against a horizon where nothing but arid rocks can be seen for several miles. Although the plumage on the areas of its trunk is actually light, its peculiar habit of taking mineral baths in iron oxide puddles gives it this striking orange coloration. On its head, a black mask around the eyes steals all the attention. This extends downwards, forming a characteristic mustache of stiff feathers that gives it a bearded appearance. Its singular behavior of living thousands of feet high is justified by very particular dietary habits. And it is not for nothing that this majestic bird is called a bone breaker. Flying from imposing heights, this ace of the skies, with the help of very keen eyesight, carefully scans the ground, looking for some remains of a carcass, a victim of the agitated wildlife of Everest. while sometimes it is not necessary for it to fly more than a few hundred feet to find a potential prey. During days of austerity, the bird will fly for several miles, for which, in a display of its cunning, it lets itself be carried by powerful wind currents, which avoids unnecessary energy expenditure. Upon finding the location of a carcass, the bearded vulture immediately swoops down on what is a veritable feast to it. Upon landing, it finds that what was once a gigantic ungulate is now only a few half-eaten bones, precisely everything it needs to satiate its appetite. The bird, without thinking twice, takes one of the bones with its beak or talons and takes flight again to the heights where it is about to demonstrate all its ingenuity. Ascending to a height of about 164 feet, the bone breaker, living up to its name, drops the bone piece it was carrying, and in just a few seconds, upon falling on sharp rocks or scree, it breaks into several tiny pieces. Immediately, just a few seconds later, the bird lands at the collision site, where it swallows the bone pieces whole. Thanks to a specialized digestive system, headed by an extremely acidic stomach, this bird is capable of digesting bones with shocking ease. Even though bones represent up to 90% of its intake when swallowing them, the bearded vulture actually does so with the sole intention of consuming the nutritious marrow inside. Along with bones and marrow, the bird usually ingests fragments of meat and attached ligaments, as well as sometimes skin and wool from the carcasses. Upon finding substantial remains of carrion, this master of the heights will repeat this process countless times until it manages to satiate its enormous appetite. In a single session, the bearded vulture can ingest up to 2.2 pounds of food. Sometimes, when the remains of the carcass contain smaller bones, the also known as bearded vulture skips the step of carrying its food to the heights and swallows the bones without needing to crush them. After enjoying a not at all light meal, the vulture returns to its home in the heights, where it spends considerable time resting on rocky ledges and cliffs. Since its flying skills are crucial for its feeding, this large-beaked bird devotes a large part of its day to caring for its plumage, slowly grooming it and removing any remains of vegetation or carrion from it to keep it in optimal condition for flight. Its habit of rubbing itself on soil and puddles rich in iron oxides, furthermore, could also provide convenient benefits for the care of its plumage, going so far as to eliminate parasites and maintaining feather health. The reddish-orange coloration its feathers acquire also plays an important role in the social life of these birds. And in the complex world of bearded vultures, more vibrant tones in their feathers signify greater vitality and strength characteristics associated with older, more experienced birds. Bright tones in the plumage are also considered a sign of good health and genetics among females, so they also represent a peculiar way to guarantee access to copulation. But all is not lost. Currently, programs aimed at the preservation of these dogs are being carried out, focusing on captive breeding as well as legal protection of the species. Although the challenges may be numerous, it is an important first step on a long road to save these majestic creatures from extinction. From massive yaks to the solitary snow leopard to tiny pikas today, Everest's wild species face numerous challenges arising from our incursion into their isolated ecosystem, which is why it is our full responsibility to promote measures that preserve the invaluable wildlife of the roof of the world. Have you been impressed by the stories of the wild creatures of Mount Everest? Then leave us your like and don't forget to comment on which was your favorite species. Remember that to stay up to date with our next releases, you can subscribe and click the notification bell. If you want your friends to also know about the natural wonders hidden by the highest mountain in the world on its peaks and slopes, you can share this video on your social networks. Without further ado, see you next time with more stories of freezing winters, stealthy felines, and of course wildlife stories.